Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Babylon, starring Brad Pitt, Margot Robbie, Diego Calva, Gene Smart, Jovan Adepo, forgive me if I said that wrong, and Lee Jean Lee, directed by Damien Chazelle. Now, because it's 3 hours and 8 minutes, I'm up for another 3.5 hour film like I brought up with Avatar, The Way of Water. So let's see how this is compared to Avatar. Let's get into this movie. It's 1926 in Bel Air, California, and Manny Torres, played by Diego Calva, picks up an elephant for party reasons, which is very unrealistic, sure, and stupid since they're in the middle of a desert in Bel Air, and pulls a heavy elephant to the house where the party is at. And how the fuck can you pull up an elephant without a heavy truck? Which is a fucking bad idea in the first place. Manny and the holder of the elephant get help from a police officer after the elephant takes a dump all over the two guys pushing up the elephant, which is very unnecessary. I mean, ugh. And they get to the house, and we see it's already a party there as a woman pissed on a fat man, which is again very unnecessary. And this party is full of naked people that it gets to the point I got tired of looking at naked people here like I did in The Wolf of Wall Street, which was again a 3 hour long movie. Like this is, as it's a very long movie with unnecessary moments with trailers that are 3.5 hours, like Avatar: The Way of Water. I'm so tired of movies lasting with the trailers for 3.5 hours, and they were both unnecessarily long. Nellie Leroy, played by Margot Robbie, arrives at the party while she's already drugged, I'll say, and crashing into something at their property while Manny helps her out and she asks for drugs. And we're introduced to a whole bunch of characters like Jack Conrad, played by Brad Pitt, who's an actor as he's getting a divorce from his now ex-wife Inna. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Played briefly by Olivia Wilde. As he arrives at the party, musician Sidney Palmer, played by Troy McCaff, and Lady Fei Zhu, played by Lee Jean Lee, as this opening party scene is out of control, and some of these scenes take way too long, as this is a very long movie, like I said before. And if I were director Damien Chazelle, I would cut some of this out in the editing room floor because some things take way too long in this movie. But don't get me wrong, the performances are very good in this movie, is well made, but it has editing issues as well as crude issues with the humor. They get a young girl named Jane Thornton lying dead. That was the girl that pissed on the fat man. As they get to a car to the hospital, while nobody was looking by bringing in the fucking elephant, which was lucky. While the next morning comes, everyone is having a fucking hangover, I'll say, as Nellie gets a role for a movie as Manny confesses to Nellie in Spanish that he's in love with her. And she drives off while Manny drives Jack home and tells Manny to make himself at home. And the standout performances are Brad Pitt and Margot Robbie, nobody else, as they turned in some great work in this movie, as these are the two characters I really liked in this movie, but more fucked up than usual. But the other characters looked absolutely miserable. Jack hires Manny to go to the movie set with him, and I'm 32 minutes into this movie as we get to the title of the movie on the screen as Nellie goes to the movie set with Lady Faye, has a family business washing suits, and Sydney waits for another gig for the music business, and we see Nellie getting on the set of her movie, and she competes with Constance Moore, played by Hugo Weaving's niece Samara Weaving, while Jack and Manny get to the set while his director is going crazy, and the side characters are chasing after Manny, and they're shooting a war picture with Nellie's makeup looking frightening, and a writer named Eleanor St. John, played by Jean Smart, is watching the filming of the war picture, and this movie is going all over the fucking place that I'm having a very hard time following this movie right off the bat. Someone smashes the last camera they borrow, and Manny gets to get another camera, driving like a fucking maniac. As he gets there, and he waits for a few hours before the sunset comes, and does get a camera and films the sunset with Jack and an actress as Nellie is being filmed dancing and looking sexy, and Constance comes in and sheds a tear, and they have a successful day at both shootings, and these scenes are good to watch, but I swear to God, this movie is absolutely over the top. Nellie has her film premiere, and there were times the movie got very quiet that I thought the movie's audio was broken at times. It annoyed the hell out of me as we get introduced to Nellie's father, Robert Roy, played by Eric Roberts, at the premiere of her movie, and Nellie gets Constance fired while she was being jealous. She was being a jealous bitch. As this needs to be in the editing room floor, in my opinion. It's going on too long. We move on to 1927 as the sound pictures are taking over the world. Jack wants to make sound pictures while his wife Olga is breaking one thing to the next while Manny goes to Nellie in New York and rides in a car together and talk about how she might have a gambling problem, and they go to a mental hospital while her mother is there, and they hang out there all day and they hang out together all day long, and they have a nice chemistry together. But I don't really like Manny in this movie, despite he's the main character in this movie, but he felt miserable to watch on screen. Manny goes to his first sound picture as it's a musical, and people are cheering for the movie, which felt pleasant, sure, as we move on to 1928, where we get a sound studio where Nellie films her scene at her first day of arriving in college, and they do quite a few takes on it for reasons like the sound versus missing the mark versus people opening the door disruptively, while Don Wallach, played by Jeff Garland, comes in as one guy is overheating in a room and gets dead from there. And this scene takes way too long, as part of it could have been in the editing room floor, once again, ladies and gentlemen, as it takes forever. Jack becomes engaged to a new woman named Estelle, played by Catherine Waterston, while at another party scene with the same character as in the first party scene, where Lady Faye picks a volunteer to dance and she picks Nellie and almost has a lesbian kiss as she runs off and has a laugh while she overhears someone saying how annoying her voice is and cries about it. Nellie, I'm talking about it briefly. While Sydney gets an offer at MGM Studios, this wasn't as prolonged as the first party scene, so I was kind of happy about that. Nellie wants everyone to see her father fight a snake, and they go to a desert, and Estelle is absolutely uncomfortable, and they find a venomous snake to fight and gets Robert to fight it as he faints, and Nellie fights it and gets bitten in the neck, and Ladyface steps up to get the fucking snake out and spits out the venom, and this can be very fucking dangerous to perform. While a car hits Jack and it knocks him out after Lady Faye gets the snake off, Nellie kisses Lady Faye, and I thought, what the fuck is going on at this point? The next scene, Jack works on a musical called Singing in the Rain. Sound familiar, folks? While Manny is there, and so is Sydney, and Manny's old boss from the first scene in the movie asks Manny to quit MGM to work with Nellie and the sound guys on Kinescope, and he has a meeting with Don and sees Nellie, and she has a snake's biting voice as he becomes her assistant, and Lady Faye helps her voice, and Sydney gets himself a house. And like I said before, and I'll say it again, this movie is all over the place. Manny fires Lady Faye and becomes the business partner of Kinescope, while Jack finds out George is dead and acts violent to Estelle, and they get a divorce from there. And how many more wives does Jack waste in this movie is beyond me. But I gotta say, before I move on to the 1930s, I really like the cinematography in this movie, as it's pretty to look at, but this is not as good as Avatar, even though it's a long movie, sure. We're now in 1930, and Nellie goes to a party with Eleanor while Manny enters, and Sydney also enters as Nellie makes an ass out of herself, while Sydney talks with his fans of what influences his music career, and Nellie asks Manny to get the hell out of there, but he convinces her to stay with the party as Nellie almost tells a joke while Jack leaves and doesn't know what the fuck is going on with the party, and Nellie tells rather an inappropriate joke and make more of an ass out of herself and some more and pukes all over the rug and the owner of the house, which made me want to puke myself. And but then thank God, there's another scene that'll make me think of that later, and almost did. But I'll get there later at the end. Meanwhile, Jack sees the audience of his two last movies and hears people laughing at them as they're bad to hear the dialogue. And of course, they sound bad too. We move on to 1932, and Jack gets interviewed by Eleanor as she writes a bad article about him. And by she, I'm talking about Eleanor, about him while Nellie is a fuck up, and people are worried about Sidney's skin as he has no choice but to put on some more black skin makeup. Being asked by Manny, as isn't he already black? Sorry to disappoint. As it is, so he puts it on for a performance, and he's ashamed. While Jack goes to an office and sees Eleanor scrapping the article while Nellie went missing, and Sidney hates it in Hollywood, and he won't come back to the studio, as Jack wants to know from Eleanor why they left, as she says his career was over for a while, which is depressing, sure. And I was watching the clock more than the screen, as this movie is taking way too long to get to the point. Well, it's all over the fucking place, like I brought up before. Nellie goes to Manny's place and asks for help as she gambled more and wasted 85 grand, meaning, yeah, like 85 something dollars, like a lot of money, I'll say for damn sure. And she says if she doesn't pay them back, they'll either take care of her by killing her off, or she doesn't have the money. And she doesn't have the money and asks someone to pay the mobsters back and hand deliver it to the mob boss, James McKay, played briefly by Tobey Maguire, while Jack does another piece of shit movie with Irv to bail his ass out. And he does the movie with Nellie, is taking cocaine, and Manny and his friend take the money to McKay to have a drink with him, as Tobey Maguire looked pale in this movie, as it was a little distracting at times. And his scene was very and his scenes are very disturbing. McKay and his assistant Wilson take Manny and his friend to another party underground called the Asshole of Los Angeles, and this party is so fucking disturbing. At one point, they meet a guy that eats rats, and that was when I was going to throw up in the theater during this scene the first time I saw the movie. But on second viewing, I looked away while they bring the cash, which we find out earlier in the scene in Hollywood made money as fake, as it's a fake, not real. And I'm thinking, they're fucked. And please God, make this stop. Make this fucking movie end, as I should have had it. As it should have had these scenes in the. We shouldn't have these scenes in the movie. It takes way too goddamn long. McKay and Wilson find out the money is a fake, and Manny and his friend get the hell out of there quickly and escape while the crocodile gets to the shooters. But they do eventually come back and shoot their asses, as Lady Faye is at a party with Jack while she goes to Europe the next day, and they say their goodbyes while having some drinks, and she takes off while Jack shoots himself in the head, which will make me miss him for the rest of the movie, sure. And the scenes with McKay and Wilson are very intense. Manny packs quickly and takes Nellie to Mexico with his friend while Nellie wants to party on some more while they're in a serious situation, and Manny wants to take Nellie to Mexico, and he wants to marry her and asks a couple people to film them as they just become engaged. And they go back to the friend's house, and he gets killed by a bounty hunter while Nellie walks away and gets herself killed by getting shot, and the bounty hunter tells Manny to leave LA forever after he pisses his pants, and which reminded me of Pulp Fiction, the movie I'm wearing right now. Well, the t-shirt. Anyways, the point is that it reminded me of that one scene in Pulp Fiction where Marcellus Wallace tells Butch his LA privileges are over, except Bruce Willis didn't piss himself, is the only minor difference. And he takes off without Nellie while Sydney wants to perform again with the studios, as Eleanor is dead, or without in the studios, that kind of a thing. As Eleanor is dead and Ellie grows up while Manny takes his wife and daughter to Kinoscope in LA in the year 1952 on vacation from New York, as Manny walks around Hollywood and sees a picture at the cinema, which was a musical called Singin' in the Rain, while he tears up as he misses his life in LA. And this is a fine film, but this may be the weakest film director Damien Chazelle has ever made in his life. Although I did like the images at the end with Jurassic Park versus Terminator 2 versus Avatar versus a lot of those old classic movies. You have to watch that clip and see what the hell I'm talking about. But let's get to the rating. I'll give this movie a 5.3 out of 10. The movie is well made, sure, and the performances by Brad Pitt and Margot Robbie are tremendous, but this movie is unfortunately all over the place, as it felt miserable to watch at times. It is way too long. Some scenes needed to be in the editing room floor. It did look pretty. The main character felt very miserable, as the editing made things way too long, as I got bored watching naked people after a while. And after the movie was over at the end of the day, this felt like a remake of The Wolf of Wall Street, but in Hollywood in a mediocre way. And I do like the cinematography, like I brought up earlier, as the movie is a pretty looking movie, but unfortunately, it's just okay at best. It's just taking too long. That's not a great thing whatsoever. So this is a mild recommendation. I wish I could have disliked it a little further, but nah, it's well made. It's got its moments, so I'm gonna give it a mild recommendation. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me for this Damien Chazelle series, and until then, Happy New Year, folks.